A year ago, November, we were all elected by our constituents. And when they elected us in our individual districts, they did not know who was going to be the majority party or the minority party. They elected us as individuals to come up here and do our job and represent them to the best of our ability. And 2 months after we were elected, we all stood in this room and we took an oath for a 2-year term that we would faithfully execute our duties and defend the Constitution of the state of Connecticut. And one of the provisions in that Constitution is that we produce a balanced budget, that we take the people's money that they have entrusted with us, that we spend it wisely, and that we balance our budget, that the amount we expend equals the amount that we ask of them and take in. As we learned throughout the months, we have different opinions, different philosophies on how we might do that. There are many of us who believe that, especially in this economic time, we must be fiscally responsible. We must be efficient with every dollar. We cannot ask more of our citizenry to give us more of their tax money, being one of the highest tax states in the United States of America. We realize as businesses close and people find themselves out of work, it's not the time to ask for even more of their tax money. There's others who believe that we have an obligation to the neediest among us, and that if we curtail any state services, it might be harmful to them. And that's the philosophy that has raged in this room and in this building for the past several months. And that's what the people at home have watched on television. And though they understand a difference of opinion, sometimes they don't get the fact that that difference of opinion has resulted in paralysis, in inaction that has exacerbated the situation. Less than a week ago, myself and the Speaker were invited, as well as others, to the governor's residence, wherein she had assembled several business leaders. And among the many things that they shared with us, one in particular was this: please get your house in order, your fiscal house in order, because people are watching what you do. Businesses are watching what you do. In some cases, they decide whether or not to come to Connecticut and build more jobs or grow more jobs, or whether or not to leave Connecticut based upon what you do. Lead by example and get your fiscal house in order, they said to us. So we find ourselves here on April 13th with a bill before us entitled a Deficit Mitigation Plan. And for those people at home that might not be able to follow the complexities of what we do up here, I think it's worthy of a review. When we were elected for that 2-year term, our first responsibility and our biggest is to adopt a 2-year balanced budget. One for fiscal year 2010 and for 2011. The public watched the controversy and the debate over philosophies culminate in a budget that was passed on August 31st. And just a few months after the passage of that bill, we found ourselves, for a whole host of reasons, including the economy, in a deficit. So the fiscal year that ends in less than 3 months, on June 30th, we find ourselves, as we sit here today, some $350 million in deficit. And the fiscal year that begins in less than 3 months, on July 1st, that fiscal year that is from July 1st to June 30th, we find ourselves in a deficit in excess of $700 million. And has been alluded to in the years beyond that, in the years when our successor legislatures will be in office, years 2012 and 2013. budgets that we as a legislator or our successors will have to deal with in less than a year's time. We find ourselves facing $3.8 billion in deficit, followed by $3.8 billion in deficit. That's where we are. There are many in this building that believe we should handle that problem all at once. Because of the differences in philosophy, that was not to be. So we find ourselves here today with this bill. This bill that handles a deficit for our fiscal year, which ends on June 30th. It is a bill that I will stand and support today, along with a great number of my colleagues on this side of the aisle. It is a bill that one could claim is a compromise. And my hat is off to our governor, who sat both sides down and wanted to reach that compromise. My hat is off to the majority party, the Speaker of the House, President Pro Tem, and the Senate, who are willing to sit down with all of us and try to reach some common ground. And we did that, and it wasn't easy. Look at the document before you. Read the line items. It is not easy to make those cuts. It is no easier for you than it is for us. They are painful cuts because they mean something to somebody. But we felt we had to do that. Is this the be-all and end-all? When we take the vote on this bill, do we walk home and say our job is done? No, we cannot do that. Because we took an oath to come up with a balanced budget. And the budget we know as we stand here today, even after we vote this bill in for fiscal year 2011, which starts in less than 3 months, is $735 million in deficit. We have an obligation as a legislature to take care of our business and do our job. We cannot pass the buck to our successor legislators. We cannot leave here at our adjournment date on May 5th and say, we'll worry about it next year. We cannot leave here and say, let the next governor and the next House and the next Senate take care of it. We have to do our job, and that's going to start the moment after we vote on this bill. We're taking that first step. It is a beginning and not an end. We have a lot of work to do in a very little time to do it. Midnight on May 5th is just around the corner. But for today, let's take this step together. Let's show the people who had elected us that when it comes to solving the problems of the state of Connecticut, there are times that we could walk hand in hand, we could take that step together. We could compromise when we have different philosophies, but we're not going to stop trying because we owe them nothing less. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a first step of many steps that we must take together in a short period of time. Let's do it for the benefit of the state of Connecticut. Let's do no harm to our beloved state. Let's air our differences in civil manner, with civil discourse, but with a spirit of compromise and reaching solution. Today, let's take that first step, only knowing that it is only a first step, and there is much work to be done. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.